Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Russell Wilson may already be headed to a new home. Also, the Minnesota Timberwolves will be without Karl-Anthony Towns for the foreseeable future. And our safeties, the new running backs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
If you're a quarterback with a name people recognize, you have been linked to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the last 2 months. But the Pittsburgh Steelers don't tend to operate with the same sort of urgency or, shall we say, recklessness that maybe other franchises do and other fan bases might want them to. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers joins me now. And Chris, that being said, quarterback is a problem right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers, most recently linked to the recently cut Russell Wilson. So where do we stand right now with who you think Pittsburgh is targeting this offseason?
Honestly, I don't think the Steelers are trying to make a big splash. We've talked about this a lot on the Locked On Steelers podcast. A lot of the beat writers that I work with, we all kind of heard the same things. What we're hearing is, like, if there was the right situation, they'd take it. But a lot of these situations that people keep posing aren't the right situations. Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury would be very expensive. Not exactly what they're trying to do right now. They're still trying to build the roster to the point where if they add the quarterback, that's the piece that gets them over the hump. But Justin Fields, if he had 2 years left on his deal, I think they'd go for that. But 1 year left on his deal, you basically have to sign him to the 5th-year extension. So you're putting like $27 million into this guy for 2 years when you don't know if he's even going to work out in your system. He has 30 interceptions and 38 fumbles in his first 3 years.
Yeah, not great.
So they're not so sure about investing not just a draft pick, but also the money to get a guy like that. But then Russell Wilson comes in, and that's the one that I think a lot of people are like, okay, well, he wouldn't cost a draft pick, and he wouldn't cost no money because Denver's already paying him. And that makes total sense from that regard. But from a lot of what I'm hearing, the Steelers aren't so sure about Russell Wilson's chemistry within locker rooms right now, as are a lot of teams in the NFL. Sure. You go back to his time with Seattle. There's all sorts of podcasts now where Marshawn Lynch, Richard Sherman, they've made it public. Like, it was not a nice situation there with Russell. It was kind of like everyone tolerated it because the team was doing well. And then you go to Denver and you see all the stuff that happens in Denver. The guys yelling at him on the sideline. I think the Steelers are in a situation that, you know what? They might just be more so like, look, we'll bring in Ryan Tannehill because he knows Arthur Smith's offense. We'll draft somebody in the draft, and then we'll roll with Kenny Pickett, and then we'll see what happens with those three. But those three specific guys that everyone keeps linking them to, there's reasons to add up why the Steelers won't make the big splash to go make up.
I think that leads to an important question for this team, Chris. Who do they want to be this year?
They want to be the team very much like the 2019-2020 Titans. That's why they got Arthur Smith as the OC. Honestly, that's who they were trying to be last year. The problem was Matt Canada just couldn't get the offense on any same page to be able to organize in that direction. That's where I think Arthur Smith's coming in. I truly think their plan right now this offseason is to get the offensive line fixed. That's why they brought in Andy Weidel to assist their GM Omar Khan. It's what he did for the Eagles to set up their current core that they're at. They want the offensive line top tier. They want to make the defense back to being elite. They were 6th in scoring this year, but they want them to be even better than that. And then that way, the Steelers can say, hey, quarterback, you're a game manager. Get the ball to George Pickens, get the ball to Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth and all those guys, and trust the protection, let the run game win. Don't try to be the hero, and defense, go out there and be one of a top 10 unit. And I think that formula alone got them to the playoffs last year when the Steelers did not need Mitch Trubisky in a game. They were 10-2. And I think that's where they're trying to say, hey, if we can just get Kenny Pickett to be solid, or anybody really to be solid, just to be steady and not turn over the ball and take the throws that are easily available, this team can be competitive. The question is, how will they get there?
What are the other ways that you think this team could shore up a team that, as you mentioned, playoff team, all they do is go at least 500 for Mike Tomlin, but that also means that they're not generally in a position to make a splash in the draft at quarterback or really anywhere. They have to deal with, hey, middle to late first round picks and second round picks and third round picks. We got to make do with that.
That's the question that everyone's wondering in Pittsburgh is like, okay, like we get that the Steelers are competitive, but is there going to be a point where they get that high prospect? I liken it to the Chiefs, where you go back and you look at how Andy Reid built them. When they got Patrick Mahomes, they were the 27th overall pick. They traded up to 10th overall. I think the Steelers are trying to put themselves in a similar position to those Chiefs were in, where they had the offense, they had a competitive enough defense. They just needed a quarterback. And when they brought Mahomes in, now granted, Mahomes is like the extreme outlier of you got the right guy.
That guy's pretty good.
I think that they're trying to get in a situation where it's like, hey, if Kenny Pickett and what they're working on right now don't work out at quarterback, guess what? They've got a system that if they draft a rookie quarterback that they really like, that they can trade up for next year or 2 years down the line, or get somebody big in free agency because they've set up the rest of the roster so they don't have to sacrifice a lot of draft picks to move up. That's where I think that the Steelers are at, is that, they don't want to do that this year because they still got to fix the O-line. I think Joey Porter Jr. needs a partner. They need to fix safety. They got to see if their linebackers are going to be healthy. If they solve enough of those problems, I think next year or the year after, that'll be the year that they make the big splash at quarterback.
Stay up to date all year on the Pittsburgh Steelers by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Steelers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports today your first listen. Coming up, how will Karl-Anthony Towns' injury impact the Western Conference playoff race? Before we get to that, the Chicago Bears retained one of their best players on a long-term deal. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can build live same-game parlays for even bigger payouts. You can also make some money off bad basketball. The Hornets and Wizards tip off tonight, and FanDuel likes the Wizards at home by 2.5. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Chicago Bears extended star cornerback Jaylon Johnson on Thursday, signing him to a 4-year contract worth $76 million with $54 million guaranteed.
The Chicago Bears locked up Jaylon Johnson on a 4-year contract that really gave both sides what they were looking for in the negotiations. I'm Lauren Cox, and I host the Locked On Bears podcast. For Jaylon Johnson, he got a 4-year deal with a bunch of guaranteed money, $54 million guaranteed over those 4 seasons. Really make sure that no matter what, he's going to get his money. But for the Chicago Bears, that maximum value of the contract keeps him down at about $19 million a year. So not the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. So they're able to still have salary cap room for them to go out and sign other players to surround the quarterback position, while also rewarding one of their best young players that's homegrown, showing the rest of the roster that, hey, we will take care of our own if you go out and prove it. The franchise tag was only a temporary Band-Aid to get them through a little more time to negotiate and get this deal done.
The Bears are not your average #1 overall pick team, that's for sure. The Detroit Pistons are improving. In a Thursday night win over the Brooklyn Nets, the Pistons' backcourt duo of Cade, Cunningham, and Jaden Ivey combined for 66, plus 13 assists and 8 rebounds in what could be a breakout performance.
Tonight was a pretty special night for our Pistons fans all across Michigan. Host of Locked On Pistons podcast, Ku Kahil here. A night that I think many Pistons fans expected they would see a lot more this year, but who cares? They got one tonight. Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey combined for 66 points in this game. This is probably the best they've looked together in a singular game. They dominated this game against the Brooklyn Nets, got the Pistons their 10th win of the season, no longer with the worst record in the entire NBA. Cade was an ultimate floor general, closed out the game in the 4th quarter. Jaden Ivey got his 3-point shot back, made quite a few threes in this game, actually made 6 of 9 threes in this game. And then Ausar Thompson played 43 minutes, matching Mikal Bridges, holding him to 13 points. Those 3 guys right there look like absolute cornerstones for the Detroit Pistons tonight. And like I said, this is something Pistons fans probably expected to see more often this year, but you're starting to see it now. Better late than never. This was a fantastic win from the Detroit Pistons.
It's really hard to find people who used to have back injuries. The Brooklyn Nets will be without Ben Simmons for the remainder of the season while trying to find ways to treat nerve impingements in his back. Simmons played in just 15 games this season because of the injury and has played in just 57 games over the past 3 seasons. And the Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat went down to the wire on Thursday night as Luka Doncic secured an NBA record 4th straight 35-point triple-double.
The Dallas Mavericks get a much-needed win against the Miami Heat. They had lost 5 of their last 6, and oh my gosh, the nightmare's over for the Mavericks. This team has these peaks and valleys where they go on a 7-game win streak and then they lose 5 of 6 games. And they've been doing this all season where they're just up and down and up and down. And when they put in the right effort, when they put in the right intentionality, they can win games, they can play defense, and they just need fine defense. Just play average defense. And if they can get to that and not allow 120, 130, 140 points sometimes, they can come away with a lot of wins because they have a lot of different pieces now. Luka and Kyrie can win them games in the clutch, and that's something they did tonight. Luka Doncic, absolutely insane. 4th straight 35-point triple-double, the longest streak in NBA history. It was him in the third quarter, 17 points that got them really going to make the comeback and then actually kickstart them into holding on to this win. Jason Kidd making a bunch of moves, trying new things, trying new lineups. The Mavericks had a lot of contributions from a lot of different players. They finally get a win. We're back up.
The Minnesota Timberwolves were having the best season in franchise history. They're the number 1 seed in the West. And then the other shoe dropped, as it tends to do in Minnesota sports. Karl-Anthony Towns is out for the foreseeable future with a torn meniscus. Sure, they beat the Pacers last night without him, but our Locked On Sports Minnesota team reacted to what they called a gut punch for Minnesota sports fans.
Man, Wolves coming off Monday's win versus the Blazers, now heading on the road for 6 straight games away from the Target Center. That starts tonight in Indiana. The bigger news, though, and the topic that came out this morning when we all collectively found out that Cat has a torn meniscus. He's going to be out indefinitely. Obviously, gut-wrenching blow to him and this team with just what's transpired this season and how well they've played up to this point. We've got plenty to discuss on that front as far as, where they go from here. We just watched a wild one go down tonight versus the Pacers, just a back-and-forth slugfest. It came down to the wire, and I'll be honest, a lot of scares early on, by the way, with Ant kind of getting banged up multiple times. He headed to the locker room a few times. He would be okay, and they needed everything they got from him and his 44 points. They ended up pulling off a dramatic win, and they prove they can still do big things without one of their best players with this 113-111 win as they stay atop the Western Conference by a half game. So kick us off here, Jack. Give us your biggest takeaways from the wild game that we just watched.
Yeah, I mean, insert your favorite exclamatory expletive of choice. I mean, with what you saw from Anthony Edwards there down the stretch of the game, he checked back in with 8 minutes and 22 seconds left. And just completely took this game over. He scored 16 points in the final 8:22 of this game, and just did it as a high usage, using all of his energy, dribble moves like crazy, just getting a high ball screen and going to work type of play. That was just a complete superstar effort from him and he did it efficiently, right? He took 10 shots to get his 16 points. He got to the free throw line 5 times. And Ant didn't turn it over. I think that was my favorite part of Anthony Edwards' game tonight. He had 44 points on north of 50% shooting, was 3 of 7 from 3, had 3 assists and 0 turnovers. This was a game where all the Timberwolves were going to do was spam high pick and roll with Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, with the Pacers being the worst defense against pick and roll in the NBA by quite a wide margin, actually. And they give up the most amount of opponent shots at the rim. So that if you look at the percent total of an opponent's total shots coming at the rim, the Pacers are the worst of that at like 36% of opponent shots coming at the rim, which is insane. So just for the Timberwolves to really force the Pacers to defend that action and just play off of it, I think was really great. I think it's something that we don't see a lot from the Timberwolves, is just continually running actions that they know the defense can't stop, forcing the defense to stop it. And they had no choice but to do that tonight without Karl-Anthony Towns. And it's certainly what Anthony Edwards is best at, is running that high pick and roll with Rudy Gobert. He's taken a huge step forward, both as a scorer and a playmaker out of pick and roll this season. I think, it took him a little bit of time to kind of get acclimated with Rudy Gobert, understanding the screening angles that Gobert likes to take, the timing of all those things. It just takes time to develop the chemistry in those types of sets and those types of little two-man games. And especially when you add in all the dribble handoffs and when Ant's coming off an off-ball screen from Gobert and then veers back to flow into a pick and roll, like all those things take time, but he's really mastered all that stuff now. And for him to put together that type of effort when this team needs him the most, especially after missing, the first few minutes of this game. I mean, Anthony Edwards, he played in 38 minutes, but he probably would have played in 42 or 43 minutes had he been there after turning his ankle in the first minute of this game. He missed the first 4 minutes and probably could have had 50 tonight. But for him to do what he did, given the context, no Karl-Anthony Towns, you have an opportunity to really send a message to the league one way or the other about how this team is going to respond without Karl-Anthony Towns. And Anthony Edwards sent a very clear message that the Timberwolves are going to keep on doing their thing, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, whether they have Karl-Anthony Towns or not.
Stay up to date all year on the Minnesota Timberwolves by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Wolves, and of course, Locked On Sports Minnesota on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, are safeties becoming the new running backs? Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Kevin Byard, Eddie Jackson, Justin Simmons. Those are some of the Pro Bowl safeties that have been released this offseason.
As we have been speculating for the last several weeks, there were several high-priced veterans who potentially had played their last game for the Seattle Seahawks, and now it looks like that is clearly the case. 3 big-time cap casualties today for the Seahawks. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, and Will Dissly all being released outright. And that might surprise some fans with Jamal Adams that it's not a post-June 1st designation, but all 3 of those players being released, which means immediate cap space for the Seahawks. Now, according to overthecap.com, Rob, they have $36.6 million in cap space. That allows them to have some flexibility to re-sign some of their own players and have a little wiggle room when free agency opens on March 13th.
And by the way, the list goes on even further. Of the top 30 highest graded safeties by Pro Football Focus last season, 11 of them are free agents. Justin Simmons is 33 on that list. It's remarkable that the league just doesn't care. Jordan Fuller is a free agent. He's 37. Cam Curl, 39. So of the top 40 safeties, 13 of them are available. And they're not going to cost a lot of money because the NFL has decided they're not going to pay them. They're not just going to not be on the team. They're not going to get paid either because the NFL has decided that's just not a thing that they're going to do. It's not just the guys who were recently cut. Of the top 30 highest graded free agents by Pro Football Focus from last season, 11 of them are free agents. 11 of the best 30 safeties from last year in the league. 3 guys in the top 11, 4 in the top 12. The league just doesn't care. And you know how they don't care? You know how I know they don't care? Because they're not paying them either, even the guys that are currently employed. There are 6 safeties who make more than $15 a year. And one of those guys is Antoine Winfield Jr., who just got the franchise tag. There are 15 wide receivers who make $20 million or more, not one safety. There's only 13 safeties who make 10. The NFL is telling us they just don't care. Safeties are the new running backs. And finally, NFL draft narratives tend to get a little crazy around the combine time, but this one may take the cake. This from an anonymous scout telling Bob McGinn in Go Long, "I don't know if I've ever seen anybody like him. He could be a running back. He was the closest thing I've ever seen to Mahomes, but he might actually be better because he's fast and a better runner and a much more pure athlete." That's talking about Jaden Daniels. Can we just, the Mahomes stuff, we have to stop. No one is Mahomes. Let's get over it. But this is the pros. These are the people who are supposed to know everything. Okay, this is why year after year, The teams get this so wrong. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national show covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, NFL free agency is almost upon us. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.